welcome to the Leadership Shift, the podcast where we explore transformative journey from management to leadership. And today, I would like to welcome Amy Timmins. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for coming. So we had several discussions about your past, and you have an uncommon career journey. Can you tell us how you bring all this experience that you have from a totally different branch that was the lawyer, sorry, like advocate, to becoming a leader in HR and tell us a little about your career evolution, how it brings different elements, and let us understand how leadership bring anything in your life also.
Yes. So I think of my career like a portfolio. And I started off as an attorney. And while that may have been my title, a lot of what I did was very communication based, very process oriented, and just, I had clients that I had to maintain. And once I realized very quickly I didn't want to be a lawyer, I was able to transfer those skills and do what a lot of really good lawyers do. And I went into consulting. And I really built up the experiences there to create my communications, to work with leaders. And I observed other leaders and what they were good at and maybe what they were less good at. And in doing so, I really understood that as you build your portfolio, you're taking these skills, and these skills you can kind of bundle into capabilities. And the capabilities create experiences, less about your title, but more about the experiences. So when I say that I'm a leader because I've created leadership experiences for the companies that I've worked for. And I encourage other people to do that too. You don't have to have the leader title, but you absolutely have to have the leadership mindset. And so after I left consulting, I ended up working about 9 years at Microsoft as a program manager, then a leader, then a portfolio manager, and loved it and learned a lot about those experiences and how I transferred probably 4 to 5 times at the time I was there, healthy transfers. And I was able to do that because I was able to lift and shift my skills, particularly my leadership skills, into other roles that needed those skills. A great example. Portfolio management. As a program manager, you have to connect the dots and you have to lead people through how those connections either create opportunities or create strengths. Either way, you've got to lead a team, whether they report to you or not. And that has transferred over and over again as I've moved down to California in Silicon Valley and have really learned the ropes, as they say, in the startup area and transferred a lot of those skills into leading teams and bringing people along for the journey and making sure that they feel heard, using a lot of empathy to understand where they are and meeting them where they are, and then successfully launching many different projects, multi-million dollar projects, managing large billion dollar portfolios, and doing it in a way that I know that I'm a leader and really helping the teams to understand that we can successfully execute together. And so that's a little bit about my background and how I think about kind of leadership in the project professional space.
Sure, thank you very much. And I'm curious, how do you define the leadership mindset? Because it is what differentiates the good from the bad, according to what you tell me. So explain me what is for you this leadership mindset?
So for me, a leadership mindset is threefold. The first is curiosity. So you go from being this tactical taskmaster to asking, instead of saying, is it done? You say, should we be doing it? Are we doing it the right way? What could we be doing differently to execute better? And so you shift into that curiosity mindset to understand just a little bit more about, hey, here's what's happening. Why is it happening? It's really, again, and I think the Project Management Institute has talked more about value delivery. So you go beyond just is it done to and when will it be done to are we doing the right thing? So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is what I would call productive empathy. So as you become more curious and you hear answers, being able to understand that sometimes there are projects or work streams that aren't doing well, and being able to say, hey, I know this is not where we want to be, and then being able to take that empathy and make sure people feel heard, and translating it into actions. And actions that execute on the vision without necessarily, what I would say, running people over. So when I was early in my project management career, somebody said to me, "Are you the type of project manager that waits for everyone to get on the train? Or are you the kind of person that is, get on the train or I'm going to run you over?" I didn't like either of those analogies, but I would say leaders bring everybody on the train, but do it in an efficient way and bring everybody together. And so I would say, again, curiosity, empathy, and then drive. Drive has to be the third piece. It can't be, "Oh no, well, I guess the task is going to be late, so we'll just wait and see what happens." It has to be, "Hey, I feel like this is at risk, and I have the strategic insights to show you the data, how I think it's at risk. And here are the recommendations that I've gathered from the team to move forward to turn our risk into opportunity." So that's how I look at the leadership mindset. You are moving from getting things done to getting them done in the right way for the right value.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. And you tell understanding the why. Do you think in organization this why is well communicated across the layer? I mean, is it just the executive that understands the why and everybody else is executing? And which
Hmm.
company did you see that were doing well? Because you did multiple company, perhaps
Yeah.
you can highlight some that did well.
Yeah, I would say that companies vary in how well they communicate the why. I think leaders have the why in their head, and the further away a leader is from an individual, the more layers you have in an organization, what they call span of control, the more that message gets diluted, the more that message doesn't get heard. And I think why is very important because people will be motivated to do well and execute better if they're really not only understanding the why, but that they're emotionally invested in the why. And because of that, I would give my answer that I spent 2.5 years at Workday and I managed their HR portfolio. And because Workday is a company that has HR software, it was a very significant endeavor to manage that portfolio. Workday was very good at minimizing the amount of layers within the organization, but even better at communicating out what was happening in the portfolio. When I first started, we did not have the why, we didn't even have the what. And when we shifted the mindset and started publishing every 2 weeks, here's what's happening in the portfolio, and here's how you can double click on to find the why, we thought we were going to be heroes. But it turns out people weren't actually actively clicking into the why. They wanted it kind of served up to them in a packaged way. Totally fair. So we shifted our mindset a little bit and we said, you know what? Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. And then we introduced OKRs, objectives and key results, which is a methodology that the objective is really the why. It is the why are we doing this? And the key results are how we're going to measure it. And when we tied it all together, we saw a 9-point increase in our employee engagement surveys, which was very significant because people felt engaged. They felt like they understood not only what was happening in the portfolio, but how it was all tied together and the why. So shout out to Workday because they do a great job at keeping their organization hierarchy flat and keeping it as flat as possible and keeping that communication much more efficient in its flow.
Yeah, very interesting. And I wanted to also explore the empathy, the emotion. How do you feel a leader need to be empathic? Because I have spoke with many leaders and they have some resistance to be empathic. They tell it's not my job to be
Mm,
empathic, to be really like this. My job is to make sure that things are executed correctly. And
sure.
they have their
So
resistance to this. What is
So
yours?
yeah, I love that. I'm a big fan now of Kim Scott's Radical Candor. I will say, when I first heard about Radical Candor, I was not a fan because I was of the same thought process that you were just describing. We need to get it done. I had a manager that said, "I'm not your mother, so you execute. I'm not here to listen to your woes." And what Kim Scott in her Radical Candor really talks about is that, look, there's definitely ruinous empathy where you're so nice and so understanding that you give everyone a pass. and you don't give them hard feedback. Understood. Then there's also the other side where you can be a real jerk and give them really direct feedback and without showing the love and care. And that's when people leave. If you want to manage attrition and keep your high performers, you have to strike a balance. You have to be somewhere in the middle where you are still showing love and care, but at the same time you are giving that thoughtful and constructive feedback, because mixing the two together is the sweet spot where people feel that a manager or a leader understands them, understands the organization's needs, understands the why, but also wants to do well. And I have never met anyone in corporate America that doesn't want to do well. The struggles I see a lot of times are people are misaligned to the mission, or they don't understand the mission and they become disengaged. And when they become disengaged, they begin to view everything in that lens, and it leads sort of a spiral of negativity. So as a manager, you can show productive empathy. I hear you. You can show care and feeding. I'm sorry that this is happening to you, or I'm really proud of you, because there's also a flip side of empathy, which is not just um, understanding where someone is when they are in a bad space, but also congratulating them and encouraging them when they're doing well. I think that gets missed a lot. But at the same time, you can say, hey, I really loved what you did in that meeting with the stakeholders. You executed on X, Y, and Z. You were thoughtful and you were very articulate, and I thought it was great. And that's a great opening to say, and here's where I think you could do better next time. Or here are the opportunities I saw to get even better. Employees will respond much better to that than your milestone is late, and if you don't fix it, we're screwed. You can see the difference in how an employee is going to stay, how they're going to participate in the process. So that's what I think of. And I myself have really had to practice empathy, and curiosity is a big part of it. I have like 5 post-it notes I keep on my monitor whenever I feel like a person on my team or someone I work with is saying something and I want to immediately argue against them. I'm like, I'm going to argue this. And I'm like, wait. Why don't I just say and figure out where they're coming from? So I'll say, tell me more about that. Or can you expand a little bit more on where this is headed? Just asking those questions, that's the empathy. And the product of that is you actually get the information you need, but you've done it in a way that that person is going to be much more open in the future to sharing risks. And as we know, the more risks that surface, the less risks that will become issues.
Yeah. I would like to ask you, because you tell me there is a bad and the good leader. So what is for
Yeah.
you a bad leader, and why are they bad leaders?
Um, so I would say a bad leader, if I think about the leadership mindset, a bad leader has a manager mindset, a tactical, forthright, let's get from point A to point B, not caring about how it's done, not caring who does it. I think that makes a bad leader. The second component of that is just not delivering. If the team is not delivering and you are the leader and you are not able to understand why your team's not delivering or delivering on time or delivering the right value, and you don't connect those dots, that puts you in the manager mindset where you're just there to fill out the paperwork and cross the T's and dot the I's. I think that makes probably what I'd say the kind of manager that people leave. Because if you're not encouraging your team to grow and they don't feel that you're invested in them, the question someone once put to me was, why would I stay at this company if this company's not invested in me? And I think that's a great question. And I think that if a leader cannot answer that either for his directs or for his team, then that necessarily, I don't want to say bad, but that's not a manager that I think that most people would want to stay for.
Yeah, and I see this, yeah, being somebody. But the manager itself, you need both. You need manager and leaders, isn't it? Or do you need just leaders in a company?
So tell me about when you say I was curious because it depends on my answer. When you say
Mhm.
manager, how do you define a manager on your side? I'm super curious.
Sure. So manager on my side, I define as somebody that is focused on the task, operation, and making sure that they control the environment so the things are done.
Hmm.
The leader will be more on the inspirational, the influence, making things happen, but being less on the reactive, leaded by the please, the control, and the protecting, but more on the pushing people to perform better. And it is a
Yeah.
little what I was referring. So I was
Yeah.
trying to see also challenge a little your perspective of the
Yeah.
management versus leadership to understand better how you see this and explain also to the people that
Yeah.
will listen us what is and how we can be better leaders.
Yeah, I think my connotation for manager is definitely one who's super tactical. And there are some things you have to be tactical about. You have to push the button in Workday to push forward the performance management. You have to push the button on Workday to accept the offer letter for a new hire. Absolutely. That should be just a 10% part of a true leader's job. And because I still feel that not everybody who is a leader needs to be a manager. You don't need to have direct reports to be a leader. And the leader really is, and that's why project manager, I think sometimes that title even gets a bad rap because people are like, oh, a manager, you're just managing the project versus leading the project. That's a whole shift in not only the leadership shift, but it's a mindset change that I think needs to happen because as project management evolves and as we think about AI can take up that tactical stuff. AI can do a Pareto analysis for you. It can do a Monte Carlo simulation. What it can't do is figure out if Steve is going to complete something he needs to complete on time based upon what you know about Steve. And if Steve is having problems at home with the family and is stretched really thin, and even though he's saying he's on track, the project leader will say, I feel like there might be an opportunity for us to dig into the details. Steve, can you tell me how you're coming along with this? Do you have any blockers that we can help with? And that approach and that conversation is something that I don't see doing in the future anytime soon, because AI doesn't have that instinct, and at least not right now, that a lot of humans do. And I think that's really important when you are leading a project. And I always say leading a project. If you are the spoke or the hub, either way, you really have to be that connector, and you have to connect that human element that isn't going to show up on paper. That's how I think of it. I think of it as well, I always say project professionals. I always say project leaders. For me, project manager is maybe for me a term that's kind of slowly shifting away, because there is this desire for project leaders, project professionals to deliver value. And to me, delivering value is a lot more than just managing something. Managing something is that tactical stuff you talked about. Delivering value is understanding where the weak points are. I used to say, as a project professional, when I was on a big project, I could see what I called the line. The line is the 360-degree view of everything that could happen, might happen, should happen from beginning, middle, and end. And when you see that line on a project, and you know that, it is both exhilarating and terrifying because you know. And when you get to that point, you have to accept as a leader, you're going to have to drive to get everything over that line, to get it delivered and to deliver on value. And that is a tricky situation, but that's what really differentiates the managers versus the leaders.
Yeah. And I love that you approach the artificial intelligence topic. So I will go a little in this. So what do you feel a leader or project manager, I mean, whatever the title is for doing the leading of the team of the project, should do to keep his job? Do you feel that there is anything that he need to develop to differentiate themselves from AI and become not obsolete?
Yes. So if I think about this, I know there's a big push for AI, and I agree. I think there are some points that I think about that I've been thinking about lately in AI. And I sat on an industry call last week. We were talking about AI and how it might replace the interface, and they call it the SaaS apocalypse, right? Software as a service is slowly going away. I disagree because the missing piece that AI doesn't have in a project is context. Yes, you can feed it all the data. You can feed it all the data and you can feed it all the information. But data is constantly changing and the context of data is changing. So a task today that's green might be yellow tomorrow. And that can be yellow based upon data from AI or yellow based upon someone's instinct. And the piece that AI is not going to be anytime soon replacing is that instinct, that understanding of the nuances of the interconnection between the different projects, the different people on the projects. And I always say projects will always be about the people. And so if I'm a project manager and I'm saying I want to keep my job, I'm worried about AI, it is articulating the value. It is pushing more for the value and less for the task. It is to get out of the day-to-day task and to more about where is this project headed? Is this project the addressing the right stuff? And a great example, if you are in, and I work in software, so if I'm in a requirements meeting and we are signing off on a requirements document, and suddenly there's an entire section that's de-scoped, and everybody's okay with it, and everybody signs off on it. AI will then just write a summary of what was descoped and the impact. A project leader will say, if we remove this section, these features from these requirements, we will not complete the mission. We will only partially complete the mission. We will not achieve all of the key results that we had hoped to achieve. And being able to call that out and being able to explain that to people, like customers have been asking for this feature. If we don't deliver this feature, we are going to lose customers. AI is only going to say, oh, we might lose percent of market share. Oh, we might lose percent of revenue, but it's not going to be able to articulate what customers and what that means. And I think that's the real value. It's really getting the people to understand from an emotionally invested standpoint what it means to hold on to a key piece of scope, or what it means if we do miss this deadline. Sure, AI says just reports we're going to miss the deadline. A project leader will say we're going to miss the deadline, and here's the impact of what it'll mean to our stock price or to our stakeholders, to the people that are relying on the project for other projects. That data set, those whole scenarios, I don't think are there for a lot of companies. Maybe the big data companies, but so the interface really, if you're using an interface for AI, you lose that. The second piece I would say is that AI is expensive. A lot of people are like, oh, AI is incredibly expensive. It's incredibly expensive to use, to purchase. It's incredibly expensive from a risk and compliance perspective if you're not set up correctly. There's a lot to think about with it that I think is going to take time to flesh out. So while that's happening, a project leader can really step in and show again. I keep using the value and the value delivery because it's so important. Become a OKR coach, become a KPI expert, understand how the metrics, what they mean and why we're using them. And being able to coach leaders on adopting the right metrics is something that AI won't be able to do. So that would be my advice for someone who's thinking about like, oh my gosh, nobody's going to ask for my Pareto analysis in the future. Maybe not, but you know what they're going to want to know? They're going to want to know again, is Steve happy? Is Steve thinking about leaving the company? So the final piece I would say is really hone in on your networking skills. If you are in a company, really become an internal networking guru. Make those relationships, make them solid, make them trustworthy. That will go a long way as people look to you for leadership.
I would like to ask you a question because of your journey. What would be your advice? Because you jump from industry to industry, you
Yeah.
work in different roles. What make somebody successful at jumping from all career? What is important? What did you feel that make you so successful that you are you today?
I think of my all of that as an arc, ARC. Um, Agile. And not agile like the methodology. You've got to be flexible. You've got to be able to pivot and be able to see the pivot coming and then accept the pivot. Next is resilient. It's tough when you enter a new industry. I was in home healthcare for a lawyer, and then I was in home healthcare industry for a while, and then I pivoted to tech, and then within tech, fintech, and now I'm in, sort of infrastructure tech. You've got to be resilient. People are going to tell you, you don't know this, you don't know that, and you have to say, yes, I don't know that. Where can I find out more information about it? So when someone may be resistant to you because you're not don't have 20 years experience, you can acknowledge that you don't in that particular industry and say, where can I find out more? You've got to be resilient and really respond. And then I think the C is collaborative. Again, networking. I am by nature, an introvert person. And so networking is a struggle for me. And so it's one of the skills that I've really worked on because, and when I say networking, it's not just, hey, Steve, how's that project going? It could be, hey, Steve, how's it? How are the kids? You want to go get some coffee? Really sometimes going to meetings that you may not have any actions for, that you're just there for presence. And I think it's really important to develop those relationships with people because I have time and time again, as I pivoted in industry and gone to a different company, usually I have a contact in that company because of my network and I can understand, and they can get me up to speed on culture. They can give me the do's and the don'ts and the faux pas ahead of time. And that's been incredibly helpful to kind of ramp up and understand what a company needs from a project leadership perspective.
Yeah. And one last question before the surprise question. What did you knew from the lawyer attorney experience that you bring into all your career and that make you successful?
I'm going to pick two things. The first is communication. As a lawyer, you have to communicate. You have to communicate to the paralegal. You have to be able to communicate with clients. You've got to be able to communicate with the judge, even the court staff. You've really got to understand who you need to talk to, and you've got to be able to talk very quickly and make your point very fast. If you ramble on, I promise you a judge will cut you off in half a second. So you've got to be clear and concise in your communications. And I think the second thing that I took from that legal expertise is something that's unique, which is I sort of made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to lead a life of what I call quiet desperation. I wasn't going to be a lawyer by day and really do what I really wanted to do at night. I was going to be true to myself. And I saw so many lawyers who were kind of unhappy. And really, like I had a bunch of lawyers as I clerked for a judge, and one lawyer was a lawyer by day and a farmer at night, and another person was an antiques dealer. And they were happier doing that. And I said, I want to do something that energizes me, that encourages me during the day. It doesn't have to be everything, but it has to be something where I really enjoy what I'm doing. And when I ended up finding the project management body of knowledge, and that book changed my life because I read it and I was like, this is what I want to do. And this is going to keep me away from that life of quiet desperation. So those are the two things I took from that my brief time in the legal field that have been immensely helpful to me.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this question is probably something that will highlight some other element of your past. It is, what part of your past are you still letting define your future? What part of your past are you still letting define your future?
Wow, that's a really good question. Um, in a positive way, it ends well. So I grew up in a very conservative household, where most women were not encouraged to go to higher education and definitely not considered to work outside the home. The plan that my many family members had for me was that I would marry, have many children, and stay at home with those children. And that was absolutely not going to be what I was going to do. And so I decided very early on that I would get the education. So I paid for my own education. I paid for my own law school. I after I got married and had twins, my husband actually stays home with the twins, and I am the full-time breadwinner. And I carry that with me in a good way because I learned early on that I would not let anyone else define me, that no one else got to define who I was and what I would do but me. And so I carry that every day. I do value people's opinion of my work, and my family's opinion sometimes of me, mostly. But I don't let other people define me. I am the person that defines me. And I have carried that forward for the last 20 years of my career and my law school education. And it has served me pretty well. So that's, I think, what I've carried forward from my past.
Okay, Thank you very much, Amy. It was a pleasure to have this discussion with you.
Yes.
And I hope to have another one later, perhaps in the year or perhaps next year. But
Oh,
let's
that's
stay
great. Thank you so much for
connected.
inviting me. Yes.
Thank you.